All right. People tell me that my English is pretty easy to understand, so let's see if that works out here. I was just back in America for the winter and I just flew in from California last week. People there told me I don't speak American anymore and that my accent's gone. So they say I sound more like I'm European or something. So I don't know what's happened to my English, but hopefully everybody can understand me. Wir könnten das auch auf Deutsch machen, aber wir machen das auf Englisch. So a small little village by the seaside. Lots of little fisher boats there, and we go to our protagonist of the story, the fisherman. The fisherman is there by the seaside. He's just doing his thing. He's catching some fish. He's having a good day. And on walks the businessman. The businessman comes and is there on vacation. He's watching the fisherman and he's curious about how it's going. And the fisherman comes in and he's caught all this fish. And the businessman says, "Wow, that's a lot of good fish. That's a great catch. How long did that take you? How many hours was this?" And the fisherman says, "Well, it was probably just maybe 2, 3 hours. It was good enough. I had a good time. It's all good now." And the businessman says, "So what are you going to do with the rest of your day? That's a lot of free time. Don't you have more work to do?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to spend the rest of my time having lunch with my family, go back and have a nice little meal with my family with the fresh catch. I'll take a nice little nap with my family, a little siesta. Maybe then I'll play some games with my kids and just have a nice day. Maybe I'll meet up with some friends later, make some music and maybe go on a walk and just talk about life. Then later in the evening, we'll all meet at the local pub and we'll have a nice meal and maybe dance until the stars come out, and that's life." And the businessman says, "Wow, that sounds okay, a little boring for me, but maybe I can help you improve your life. Maybe we can figure out a way to make your life more successful. Here's a plan. So, what if you fished a little bit more? You started to build up your fleet. Maybe you could add more people to your crew. Maybe you could add more ships. You could then start to catch more fish. You could sell more fish." The fisherman says, "Okay, this sounds not so bad. What comes next?" So then he says, "Well, after a little while, you can leave this little town. You can go to a big city like New York or London. Imagine your life there. You could then start a bigger fishing business. In London or in New York, you could then open some sort of factory. You could get to canning the fish. You could do big quantities of fish. You could go worldwide." And the fisherman says, "Okay, it sounds like a bit of extra work that I'm not used to, but maybe it could be all right." "Well, so what happens after that?" "Well, if you really want to go big time, then you got to put yourself on the stock exchange. You got to be selling stocks. You got to have ownership for your company. You can be a multi-million-dollar company at that point. And if you're lucky, you can start to open offices worldwide. You can have offices in every major city around the world." The fisherman says, "Well, okay, it sounds kind of cool, but what's after that? I mean, that's a lot of money. What am I going to do with all that money?" "Well, you could buy a few houses, right? You could have a big house in your home country. You could have a big house in Europe. You could be a king in your own big house. And after that, you'll have spent some years doing all this, so you can watch it all unfold in front of your eyes from your lovely, lovely mansion." And of course, at this point, the fisherman's saying, "I'm not sure if this life is quite the one I want, but it sounds okay. But I guess at that point, what do you do once you reach that age?" "Well, if you're lucky, you can then sell your businesses, have a bunch of money. You can then buy a house in a nice little seaside village somewhere. There in your little seaside village, you can maybe go on walks, you can go fishing, you can take naps with your family, you can go out to dinner with your friends, you can make some music, and then, you're old and you die, and that's just how it goes." So at this point, of course, the fisherman knew that this was not the best deal that was being offered to him. And luckily, he was smart to avoid such an offer. But I think this, for me, is a bit of my story, as I don't know if I'm the fisherman or the businessman, or perhaps I was a businessman that is now back to being a fisherman. But I guess I learned a little bit of the cautionary tale of this. So this is perhaps the tale of another small little fisherman lad. Perhaps when you're young, you're a fisherman because you don't take life so seriously and things are pretty easy and pretty fun. So this is me as a little kid. And my family, as with many other Americans, came from Europe. These 4 or 5 different groups all came over on a boat at some point. Got on this boat. I don't know why you do that. You'd think you'd die in the 1800s getting on a boat, but they survived. And they came over en masse and settled the United States. A lot of us know how this story goes. My family went west, and I grew up in Arizona and California. And so, since we're at a Journey Jam, I'll give you a little taste of where I grew up in these different places. Highly recommend traveling there, although it's a little expensive because America's really expensive. But come up to me afterwards if you want some travel tips, and I can help you get around these places. So this is Arizona, really classic, like Wild West cowboys sort of stuff. Really crazy sort of desert landscapes with the Grand Canyon, the Wave. This one's called the Wave in northern Arizona. Horseshoe Bend, Havasupai Falls. And so it's a very beautiful place. Different a little bit than California because Arizona is practically a desert, whereas California has a lot more nature similar to here. So Yosemite, then it also has Death Valley, the hottest one. I think the record of hottest place on the planet is in Death Valley, often in the summer at like, I don't even know, 55 degrees Celsius or something like that. San Francisco and Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay with Oakland, the coast, the beaches, very Mediterranean style climate and temperature. And I lived in San Francisco for many years, and that's kind of now where I call home back in America. This is LA, home of Hollywood, Disneyland, all these places. And then it's pretty crazy because it doesn't happen very often, but you can, and this last winter it did, you can get snow in the mountains. And then right at the beach, you can get a picture like this, and you can go surfing and skiing all in one day. So this is my family, my dad, my mom, my brother, and this is, basically growing up in America. So what did it look like? So fairly simple, and I don't think this looks terribly different than maybe what life can look like in Europe. Certainly we look similar. Not bad, growing up in the 90s with Mario and having a pretty good time with all sorts of new video games, new technology. Going to high school, classic like High School Musical stuff on the basketball team. And it wasn't that nice, and we did not have lockers, no lockers allowed. Graduating from high school, and when I went to university, my parents said very clearly, you need to do well. The world is not such an easy place. There's a lot of competition out there, and if you want to get a good job and if you want to have a good life, you need to do well in school. So I took this very seriously, studied really hard, and I actually did really pretty well. I was at the top of my class, and I got all sorts of awards, and I studied basically computers and IT. And in classic American fashion, we did our graduation ceremony in a multi-thousand person basketball stadium with fireworks, everything to the extremes, just to be stereotypical. And my name was up on the highlight screen in the middle, and I was sitting on the stage in the front because I had done really well in school and taken the tests well. And so it was somehow a fairly classic, good American dream. Good family, good situations, good education. You had all your needs taken care of. And so everything went pretty well, and I got a good job. Everything was going well as planned. San Francisco, and this is one of the richest, most expensive places, at least in the country. I was working there doing consulting and tech stuff and big buildings and all sorts of this stuff. Worked in projects at all the big tech companies like Google and Apple and Facebook and Microsoft, and got a good look behind the scenes of all these companies, which slowly turned me off from a lot of it. But life in San Francisco and life in California was pretty nice and pretty good, and it looks very glamorous, similar to New York. And so you kind of are in this strange position of thinking, this is really cool and really beautiful. But at the same time, right as you walk to work, there's people on the street like this. And so you are left wondering, how does this happen that a billionaire drives by in his self-driving Tesla, but then there's people like this on the street? How can this be? And of course, we all know, I don't think this is exclusive to America, but consumerism and consumption is extreme. People buy all sorts of new stuff all the time, and then 6 months later it goes in the trash. And this is just not a very good way to do things. And so I started to wake up to a lot of this stuff. And then 2016 was sort of this crazy year of, for me at least, this crazy year of awakening where lots of stuff was happening, not just in America and in California, but also around the world. So Brexit, as we all know, Brexit from the EU in 2016, we went from this guy, this good-looking guy, to someone that doesn't quite look as good. And it was a very confusing time how we went from hope to nope. And for me and everybody else in San Francisco, we were living in a bubble, I guess. We couldn't understand how this would be possible. On the coasts of the country, you don't really get what it's like to be living in Texas or Alabama or in Mississippi. It's a totally different world. At the same time, I believe this was in Vegas, all sorts of, and I know you guys get it all in the news here because I watch the news here. We have like a shooting every day or like every 6 hours. It's unbelievable and it's terrible. And this was a huge one that happened in Vegas. So this was all happening at the same time. And I continued to see stuff like this. And I just said, what the heck is going on? How is this happening? And needless to say, I started to lose a lot of faith in America and to throw more stuff in. Climate change was a big thing. Here's the coast of California and droughts and never-ending fires every year, burning thousands of acres of trees and looking like those pictures that you've seen from Australia where the sky is red and you can't see more than 100 meters away. And I was in those situations. And then a hurricane through the Caribbean. Puerto Rico is a territory, kind of colony-esque territory of America, and this 2 hurricanes went through and destroyed Puerto Rico. So this was all incredibly fast. This all happened in about a year. And I was asking myself, what is going on? It seems like everything's falling apart. And if it couldn't be better, we have Trump at the helm of the ship taking us in bad directions. So at this point, it took a lot of soul searching, but I decided that I can't do this anymore. And so I basically sold most of my stuff, put it into my backpack, similar to our previous stories. Did a lot of hitchhiking, backpacking, but I went to Puerto Rico. And after the hurricanes with a friend, he had gone ahead of me and he had invited me to come and help. And I decided this was the best thing I could do at this point with my life, is to try and help after a disaster. So I went to Puerto Rico, got trained up, and then got to trying to help the people there with getting them money from the government, rebuilding infrastructure, basically trying to deliver aid to people who had been the most affected. And at this time, as if things kind of couldn't get any worse, my dad, who had been, more than a dad at some point, because I had grown up, he had become a really good friend of mine. As if things hadn't already been fun enough, he had turned 60 years old. He was getting close to retirement and wanted to stop working. And most people in America live with this dream of like, oh, I'll work really hard, I'll get successful, I'll have money, and then I'll retire someday, and then I can enjoy my life. So that's where he was at. And it happened to be the worst flu season in nearly a decade. And my dad got really sick with the flu. Literally from a Saturday afternoon, he was playing tennis, to Saturday night, he was in bed in really pretty bad shape, to Monday, he was home alone. I was in Puerto Rico at this point, and if you guys don't know, health insurance in America is a privatized for-profit institution, so it costs a lot of money. You never know how much it's going to cost. What's your insurance going to cover? It costs to call the ambulance. You pay immediately, I think, at least $500 for an ambulance. So he was just trying to sleep it off at home, was trying to do something reasonable and get some sleep, didn't want to call the ambulance and waited too long, and ended up passing away at 60 years old from a simple flu in the richest country on the planet. And this, for me, was basically, this was the point where I was broken from all of this. It was too much all at once, and this all basically happened in about a year. And so I sat there for a while not knowing what to do. Of course, I came back from Puerto Rico, and I was there for my family and all this sort of stuff. But at this point, I basically said, in a polite way, sort of F America. Like, I really am not happy with this country. And basically the way I saw it was the system here killed my dad, because there's no way a person that was an engineer and had a good job should be afraid of calling the ambulance because of what's it going to cost. So at that point, went back into the backpack, the most reliable, safe place you can find. And I sort of set myself out on a mission to say there's got to be a better place out there. And that was strange for me because, of course, a lot of people in America are drinking some sort of America First Kool-Aid, that America is the best country on the planet. So I set it out there as there's got to be better systems out there, and I know there's got to be better places. So for many, literally for years, I decided to basically go on traveling, some with hitchhiking and buses and couch surfing, and of course the time in Puerto Rico. I went back after my dad's funeral and tried to continue to help after the hurricane, and went to South America further. And then I wanted to come over to Europe, of course, because I knew that my ancestors were from Europe, and I had heard good things about Europe, and I had heard that in some countries you take a 2-hour siesta in the afternoon, and you have a nice long coffee break, and you only work 37 hours and this sort of stuff. I also took a lot of books with me and was just reading a ton. I think I was reading like 2 books a month at this point, just trying to understand what's going on in the world. And I had a great experience of meeting literally hundreds and hundreds of people in lots of different countries. And ended up traveling 36 states, 26 countries, 306,000 kilometers, 94 cities, and this was actually maybe more like 6 or 7 years, but worked and volunteered in 15 different organizations, and then read 107 different books. And at the end of it, I looked like a totally different person from the time that I had quit my job to the time that I had decided to, I guess, slow down my travels a little bit. So what I came from this, and these are the lessons that I took from this time, and I'll share some more lessons later, but the planet and the people on the planet, the nature and everything is so magical and so incredible. I mean, I thought in California and Arizona it was really special with the nature, but it is so incredible, the nature, and there are so many good people out there. And at this time, when I started traveling, Trump and a lot of other people and the news were talking about actually all the bad things going on in the world, and how there's so many bad people out there, and how there's lots of issues. So for me, this was such a good lesson to remember the world's full of awesome people and awesome places. And then what I also got out of it is that there's a massive problem with wealth and inequality across the world. Of course, Europe has quite a few very rich and wealthy countries too. America just has way too much money and way too much wealth, and it doesn't really spread out that much. And I learned that I think I was in a bubble a little bit, but where I was growing up and where I was living were some of the richest and most expensive places in all of North America. So it was definitely, again, extreme with these places where you have self-driving cars on one street with a billionaire in the back like Elon Musk going to Twitter's headquarters down there, and then you have 200 people on the street that can't find a place to sleep. So that was a huge lesson, and what I found so ironic and so paradoxical out of this is that, of course, America's not even in the top 10 of this. How could you have all these nice toys and gadgets and tech and all this money and not really be happy? And actually, most of these countries were in Europe. And so this is why I've ended up spending more of my time in Europe. America, of course, is low on the list. Life expectancy, how long are you expected to live if you were born and raised and grew up in one of these countries? Of course, well, Austria is on this list, so that's sweet. But I'm pretty sure like Germany is number 26, America is number 46. So again, it's a bit strange with all the money and all the wealth and how you actually are doing worse. And of course, I tie this back to the system and the society isn't designed for people. It's designed for businesses, it's designed for cars, it's designed to make money. Of course, it's always strange to see buildings like this where you just wonder, how can people live in boxes constantly? And this was in Puerto Rico again. And what I took away from it was how almost everybody I met in South America and in the Caribbean and in Puerto Rico were happier than people I knew in California, with probably a tenth of the wealth and probably a tenth of, I don't think there was, a lot of people didn't have a roof or even running water, and they were still seemingly happier. So ultimately, big lessons of making life a bit more simple, making life a bit more happy. The fisherman, as we talked about earlier. And again, how should things be designed? How can we structure things? And of course, it's pretty awesome in Europe that we can walk places, we can bike places, but it's not even designed that way in America and Canada. And then of course, I won't say that this is totally scientific and factual. I don't have a source here, so don't quote me. But from what I gathered and what other people have come up with is we're actually not even quite as happy as we used to be. We have all this new tech and all these new gadgets and all this new stuff, but it actually isolates us from each other instead of bringing people together. And of course, as we know, a lot of this stuff just ends up in the trash. So one big lesson, less is more, sharing is caring. This is so often so true from all the people that I met. And then a couple positive things that I ended up taking away, because like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of America anymore. But what I kind of recognized was how cool it was that so many different people from so many different countries could come together in one place and relatively in peace live there together. And ultimately, it's incredible how much space there is in America. You can drive for hours and hours and not see another person. And of course, yeah, some technology is a little too much, but it's also incredible the stuff that has been developed and has come out of there. So I've kind of started to come around to, well, not everything's so bad in America, but there's also this thing, which I think is incredibly important. And I see this as something that is still a bit of a struggle over here sometimes, is what's really being tolerated and what's really being accepted. And going back there, I still find it incredible that I can be with friends and in groups where perhaps I'm the only white person and everybody's getting along and everybody's understanding each other, and people have different languages and different religions. So this leads me to where I am today. And obviously that is Innsbruck. Innsbruck is not a very bad place. It's quite nice here and it's quite beautiful. And I try to get around and still do some travel, but try to share this message, try to spread a message about the system and about how we have to. I think actually in Europe, it's pretty solid here. And I'm actually quite jealous of a lot of Europeans and how you guys live here. I wish a lot of my friends and family back in America could live like you guys live here. And that's America, right? That's actually not supposed to be that bad. But life can be pretty good if we make it that way. And so that's a big message of just, we have a beautiful planet. We have a challenge with the system, and we have a challenge with what's going on with big businesses and some politicians and the system that's running things, and how the system is trying to take our beautiful planet and turn it into a machine. And we also have a big problem with inequality. And I think Europe is doing a quite good job, from my experience, with leading the way and showing that people have power. And I hear it with the strikes in here, Germany, Austria, and in France. It's pretty impressive what people are able to do, and I try to express this to people back in America to get out, to protest more, to be more active, and I try to do this as much as I can as well. And ultimately, we all have something to learn from each other. There's so many different countries on the planet, and I think Europe's doing some awesome things. A lot of other countries are doing some awesome things. America is doing some interesting things. And if we would cooperate and instead of compete with each other, we could actually be in a much better way. And that's the only future that we have. This is another thing that I think Europe does in a great way. And I really wish that this could come back for America. So ultimately, main message, be the change that you want to see out in the world. Ultimately, a cautionary tale for Europe. You guys are doing great in a lot of ways. Don't screw it up. We need good role models. And let's create fairness and equality out there. And be the fisherman, not the businessman.